once you get the core of that idea, it just changes your perspective. You don't play to win. You play because you want to like uncover the truth so that you can continue playing.
The Research Labs podcast by Sunday Pajamas. Welcome to the Research Labs podcast.
Thanks a lot. Feels great to be here.
So I think I got very intrigued when I checked out the Arda Finance. It's pronounced Arda,
Yeah, it's pronounced Arda. It's borrowed from, if you know about Lord of the Rings. It's a place there. Yeah.
and then I checked out the website, and it said risk management for crypto assets, if I'm not wrong. And that is a space that I have previously been involved with. So I wanted to understand not just the business side of it, but more of a technical side of it, as to what it is and like how did the idea came about and where is it right now.
Cool. I'll give a brief history about how we ended up with this. Right. So me and Pranay, who's my co-founder, we were jamming a few ideas. We wanted to build something like this. Like, how do we make any fintech company a crypto exchange? How do you make a fintech company compete with somebody like Coinbase and Binance, right? So we wanted to build like a full-fledged API suite for these companies to quickly build on top of Web3 and DeFi specifically. So that's how we started. But what happened with the Terra Luna crash was that the old business model wasn't making much of a sense in the current scenario. So when we wanted to quickly pivot, we obviously believe a lot on crypto and what it can bring to the world, right? So we wanted to do something there. So we went back to like thinking from first principles, right? Taking analogy from what Jeff Bezos used to say, right? So you don't focus on the things that change, you focus on the things that don't change, right? So customers of Amazon would never ask Jeff Bezos to like increase the prices, or can you just ensure that the delivery is a bit slower, right? These are like fundamental human needs. So we thought that what is it that are much more first principles in crypto, right? Obviously, there are two things. One is there's a lot of people wanting to make a lot of money, right? Number two is they want to make a lot of money while capping their downside. Obviously, helping people make a lot of money is what a lot of protocols are actually doing, like lending, AMMs, perpetuals, multiple other things, right? So we thought that like how about build a suite of risk management tools that help people manage their risk in their portfolio exposure across DeFi protocols to begin with, and eventually across all Web3. That includes NFT, just spot and derivative trading and things like that, right? Now, when it comes to risk management, there's a lot of things that are going on in crypto, right? My co-founder used to tell that the only graph that goes to the right in Web3 is the number of hacks that happen. Right? So obviously, like looking at hacks, bridge exploits, wallets being drained, smart contracts being exploited, right? That is one side of things. The other side is a bit more subtle, which is the economics of protocols. Just the sheer way the protocols are engineered, right? Like inadvertently, you might end up with some losses versus if you had just held the tokens. For example, if you have provided liquidity to a Uniswap pool, there's a good possibility that you'll get hit with impermanent loss, plus a few other things going wrong, right? Versus if you had just kept the tokens, you could have made like you saved the principal at least, right? So how do we like measure, monitor, and alert users on both kinds of risks? Is the is the fundamental problem that we are solving. And to build it, we are not only building a risk management platform that sits on top of third party providers, we are building the whole stack ourselves so that we get like much more control on what we want to do. Uh, yeah, and it also helps us like figure out optionality in the future if need be. One of the things that you wanted to touch later in the call is the set of books that inspired me, right? Like Taleb is the guy. Even if I'm not a big fan of Taleb, the person, but Taleb, the author, his books have been like game changing for me, right? So building the whole stack internally without like too much effort being spent can also give us the optionality where we could take the data platform. So there is risk management platform. Below it, there's a data platform, and below this, there is an infrastructure where we run the full nodes and all that. You could just take in the data platform and make it a marketplace where we will let anybody run machine learning models to predict risks in crypto. Could be a future play that we could think about.
The risk management that you are talking about is it has a lot to do with uh, understanding where the assets are moving and then kind of helping customers to make more profound investment decisions, or that's just one part of it.
You could divide it in three different ways, right? First thing is before you even try to invest somewhere, what kind of metrics that we can give, what kind of safeguarding tools that we could build that could help you with that. That's one. Second thing is post facto. After you have invested, we need to constantly monitor your position and a bunch of metrics that come from each of these protocols that you have exposure to, or it could be just the token prices, right? Uh, Third thing is when something bad happens, inevitably something bad is going to happen, whether you like it or not, right? How do you how do we help you defend your assets? Is another piece where simplest example could be if we continuously track your impermanent loss, when it hits a particular threshold, we could just pull out the liquidity automatically.
Got it.
So it's both pre-facto and post-facto. It is definitely something that helps an investor decide where to put the money in, but we are not like going in depth into uh, like covering all of the thousand protocols and giving you metrics and all of it. But we are much more focused on, hey, you have exposure to these protocols. We have the expertise to understand in depth about what are the things that could go wrong in these protocols and build a suite of risk management products for you.
So when you say it kind of takes care of it on its own, how will the user side of it look like? Do I have to configure right from the start, or there are just like pre-built rules in the platform that just it just takes care of it?
It is a mixture of both. So you're talking about monitoring, right? So on the monitoring piece, we have predefined rules that tracks a bunch of parameters around TBL, available liquidity in a pool, and things like that. Right? That is built out for you. And there are things that are specific for each protocol and each pool within the protocol that we would add custom rules, right? So you, as a user, you would get some of these rules for free, and you could set threshold parameters for some other rules that we have, right? And you could configure where you would want to get alerted on. That's just the first step. The next step is, why do you just need to get alerted on if you could automatically defend your assets, right? Which is where we are building a bunch of smart contracts that wraps over a lot of these protocols, and we would get like pre-authorization from you. We would built in like bunch of access control parameters on these smart contracts to ensure that like only you are able to like control everything, and only an external account is able to like trigger the recovery and all that, right? Let's just say that all of those things are there. So there's a bunch of smart contracts trying to work for you. You pre-authorize it, and we know exactly when to pull out your funds, and we'll do it when the threshold hits.
Would you define this as an opinionated system or no?
In some sense, yes, because the set of rules that we have is kind of based upon like what we think could go wrong from the economics of a protocol. And obviously the bunch of hacks that happened on bridges and cryptographic hacks and multiple other things, right? Those are somewhat generic that we could like take it everywhere. So the moat of this business is also how deep you are getting into a protocol, and expose all of these metrics and help you build your risk profiling on top of it.
So when you are building something like this, is there a discussion or a consideration when you are building the rules out, for example, that will automate a lot of things? How do you mitigate the risk on it? In the sense, how do you ensure confidence in the decisions the system is making? Or these are like generic rules that everybody knows? Like how does that part work?
So, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking about there's a bunch of rules. How do you know if the rules are triggered based on the right parameters?
Consistently over a very long period of time. In the sense, lot of, let's say, algo trading platforms that you see, the users kind of set the rules a lot in almost most of them. And and this algo trading platform, or all the platform that you see, they are just there to trigger the rules set by the user. But from what I'm understanding, what you are trying to do, or you guys are trying to do, is that
Oh yeah, because it's on algo trading. Yeah, because on algorithm platforms, the dimensions of rules might be the superset of all the dimensions might be limited. But in this case, it kind of like keeps expanding as you look at newer protocols with newer variants and multiple attack vectors happening, right? So it's a bit more flexible in that sense. But even then, we are not going to like present you with like 1,000 different parameters and like confuse the hell out of you and ask you to like set all those things. We are going to like create predefined profiles of what we think could be like a base that you could build out of, right? It will involve some bits of white glove support as well on like working with the customer very closely and helping them nail all these rules down, right? So from that perspective, it's the reason why we are not targeting retail customers. It's why we are targeting institutions.
so you can like closely monitor what they're up to and help them out.
Yeah.
I see. That's interesting, because when it comes to retail platforms, right? I mean, they sound smart, but in the end, you have to do all the grunt work eventually.
Yeah, it is because if you're building for like millions of users, you have to keep it generic. Versus if you're building for like handful of customers, like we don't need, I don't think we need more than like 1,000 customers to even hit like 1 million ARR, right? So these are enterprise customers. We could like work very, very closely with them, define the superset of all the parameters. And it could be like one of the side effects of working with bigger customers is that they're going to come up with their own sort of feature requirements. It's going to be up to us to like define how much of that makes sense from a product perspective and try to generalize it as much as possible.
So I would say, when you're building something like this, how does the, I would say, decision look to, okay, what we should build next? In the sense, I'm sure when you start brainstorming, there are like thousands of ideas. So how do you cut it down to, let's say, five that needs to be implemented in the next? Like, what's next?
Yeah, it depends on the stage you are in, right? When you are in the idea maze, right, you essentially have to talk to as many people as possible, try to ask unbiased questions and figure out what are the common things that common pain points that these people have, and if there is a solution, like are they willing to pay for it, right? That's how you start with the core idea, right? And let's just say for us, we nailed down that hey, risk management is something that we want to put, and even within risk management, there's like plenty of directions that we could take, right? Based on pure statistics, we figured out that hey, out of all the security and economic risks, the number of the volume of economic risks are much more than security risks because of like pure play economics at play with protocols, right? So we saw that okay, so there's a big market that we could play in. That even if there are multiple competitors, it need not be a winner take all market, right? Then based off of it, we started talking to a bunch of people to see if there is some semblance of interest and buying power and all that, right? Uh, Now you start talking to people, you have to like really nail down the specifics, right? Given the amount of limited bandwidth you have, the things that we do typically are list down the five different things that you want, and we'll pick the top two and do it immediately.
Okay.
Like it directly comes from the customers, and the more you talk to people, the more the Venn diagrams that you have, and a lot more convergence has to happen. If there is not many convergence across the different, like the circles in the Venn diagrams, then you're literally building like a distorted product, which is not a great place to be, right? Or you're not asking the right questions. So once the first, like the V1 is out, right? The next problem would be to how do you launch incremental features, right? Obviously, the easiest way is to like keep working with the customer and like figure out, what is their next biggest pain point and solve it. Uh, but it's also true that customers all the time they wouldn't completely know what is it that they want. So you have to like seed them with ideas about, hey, what if we built this? Would this be interesting to you, right? For example, this recovery piece that we have was essentially like off the hand idea that we talked about with a prospective customer. We could also build this, and we didn't even bother too much about it. But the customer was like, dude, wait, this idea seems interesting. Let's dig deep, right? So, so it could also be that way where it's a bit more collaborative. And the other metrics, sort of like dimensions to look at is like what other competitors are doing. Is the environment changing that you need to like sit back and take a note of and build something there, right? For example, initially I talked about how economic risks overshadow the security hacks, but the number of security hacks are expanding, and if nobody's trying to solve it, it's literally like a barren land where nobody has staked a claim. You could just go there and build a product there, right? That's where a bit more of strategy comes in, right, rather than tactics. While in the first, like V1 or V2, a lot matters is the tactics, like what are the specifics that you do. As the product evolves, you tend to move from like tactics to a bit more strategy.
Yeah. Because I would say I'm talking to a lot many founders, and they are very early stage. So like when you mentioned that, when you just have a lot of ideas, you have to like start talking to people and try to be very subtle about it. I I, I don't know. It kind of seems to me that is really difficult.
Difficult to talk to people.
Not talk to people. I'm talking from an overall perspective, in the sense navigating through that period when, yes, you have ideas, yes, you want to build product, yes, you're talking to people, and you have all the insights, right? But you kind of stuck there.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the mental models could be ikigai, where you would see what is it that you like, what skills do you have. For example, like there could be a great idea in space tech, but neither me nor my co-founder we have any experience there, right? We don't have. So so it's a combination of like skills plus what is it that you like and what is it that the market demands. But most importantly, like as you start talking to people, one of the mistakes that we did was just looking at the product from a surface level, right? They try to like understand their pain points, then pitch our idea. Most of the people that we talked to were like, yeah, great. This was before the idea that we worked on, right? So people are like, great, this makes a lot of sense. But what we possibly did not do is to actually go to the next step and see that, hey, if I build this product tomorrow, how much would you pay? And if possible, like try to get into an agreement, like a signed LOI or something, right? That's one. Number two is the kind of people that you talk to also matters a lot. We were initially talking to a lot of like pre-idea, early stage sort of companies who are a bit more supportive. They were like much more empathetic. Then later on, as we started talking to like much more stable companies like Seed, Series A, Series B, they gave us like solid feedback. In fact, I still remember one of the CTO of the companies that we spoke to, he literally told us that, hey, dude, you're a 125K funded pre-seed startup. I cannot let you deal with something that is mission critical. Let you deal with something that's mission critical for me. So this is the type of concrete feedback that you would want to get as early as possible.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, your goal should always be that either one way or the other, you should get strong signals. Yes, going back to what Richard Feynman used to say, right? I'm not like quoting him verbatim. It is probably easiest to fool yourself into thinking that okay, things are going well. I'm getting like signals. You don't probably realize that these are like soft signals, not like hardcore buying signals, right? You don't want to be there. You want to like get out of that zone as soon as possible, and just try to get yes or no, or even like understand more about the product, whether you actually want to like spend time building this for the next 3 4 years at least.
So when you got that feedback, right? Like, dude, I cannot let you work on such critical stuff. Yeah. How, like, what did you guys do after that?
We asked him more details around like why he thinks that was true. He gave enough pointers around, hey, if there is like a production issue, do I need to get on a call with you and ask you to fix? This is like core data of a system. What if something goes wrong? Like how do I validate? So we got a signal that he wanted to control a lot of things in house, which meant that early stage companies, if our initial hypothesis was true, they would want to work with us, right? Because they have like plenty of other things to figure out. And as they become mature, they would want to build a lot of things in house, which is not a great product to be there. Then you have to like there's a constant churn that happens as a customer grows bigger. Then you have to like backfill with newer customers, right? For Slack, it's the reverse. Slack is the ideal role model here. You start with early stage companies. As the company grows bigger, companies are going to like stick with you. You are going to grow bigger with the company. That's like the ideal product to build. In this case, it was the reverse, right? So we thought deep. So yeah, so one of the things that we wanted to avoid is the sunk cost bias. We spent like 3 4 months talking to like more than 200 300 people. uh, we were ready to like ditch it and move on because we got strong signals.
Yeah. So this was the previous idea.
Yeah, I think YC talks. Yeah, this was the previous idea before we started on the. This was before we started on the making a fintech company a crypto exchange idea, right? One of the things that YC also talks about is the thing that kills startups. There are two things that kill startups. One is lack of conviction. Two is co-founders fighting with each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So fighting in the sense not agreeing on feature ideas or like just fighting about issues in the company.
Yeah, generally there is some animosity. You're not looking eye to eye on a lot of these things. You're not like able to work it out. uh, there's a bunch of like starting a company. You would assume that the early stages of a startup is much more easier, and it gets, or rather early stages of startup is much more harder, and it gets easier after you have raised funds and all that, but it's actually the reverse. Right, the things tend to get harder as you go on with the journey, right? So the only thing that will matter, there are two things that will matter, like YC said, is how convinced you are about the startup, the idea that you're working on, and do you actually want to work with this person, even though things aren't looking great for the next like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when you pivoted to the risk management idea, when?
We pivoted to this idea, you wouldn't believe, on the week that the Terra Luna crash happened.
Okay. So after the crash happened.
Yeah, after the crash happened.
So was it like one of the influences or it was just a coincidence?
It definitely was one of the influences because uh, we did not expect that to have like such a big impact, but we knew that something bad is happening, and we knew that not all the dominoes have fallen. But it's always difficult for the human mind to visualize how bad things can go, right? You know that things can go bad, but it never struck us that hey, 3AC would go, Celsius, Block 5, Voyager, and all of the dominoes would fall, right? We just didn't expect. But what we knew was after the crash, then the sentiment about crypto was extremely negative, especially in the fintech world, right? It's going to get even more harder. for us to acquire customers. So this idea would not make sense right now. Even though the idea was great, we might take a relook at it in the future. But given the current market scenario, that's why I said, right, with a startup, actually there are three things, right? There is demand, there is supply, and then there is the market. You have to be aware of all of the three things. If something changes in any of these, it will definitely affect you. If there's a change in demand, whether increase or decrease in demand affects you. If there's a change in supply, for example, for some reason you could build the same software with lesser resources, something happens there, right? Like a patent or an innovation that you do, that affects. Third thing is, if the market changes, you cannot control this, right? If it affects you, you have to be aware of it and be ready to like move on.
I see. So you pivot after the crash, and then you get into YC.
No, no, no. So we got into YC like around the same time last year. We were in the winter 22 batch. We completed our YC with the fintech, the DeFi as a service idea for fintechs. And after YC, when the crash happened, we had to pivot. So before YC and after the YC, we pivoted literally. But the second pivot wasn't like a hard pivot, unlike the first one. The first one was probably about B2B payments and ledgering, completely on the fintech side. We pivoted into crypto. And the second area is still in crypto, but building infrastructure tools.
So when you're pivoting, right? How does that discussion starts? In the sense, okay, there are things are changing in the market. You're noticing it. You read the news, but in the sense, you don't really feel the effect of it immediately, right? Like,
You are right. You are exactly right. There is no discrete point in time where you feel that, okay, this is the point where we like change the direction of the ship. It has never happened that way for us, right? So it was almost like the slope is going down, right? We start to realize that, okay, maybe this is not working, and in parallel we would have like two or three different ideas that we want to explore. Once we get some reasonable confidence in an alternative idea, we would ditch this idea.
so do you feel there is always a sense of, it's like jumping ship in a way? Like, yes, you can run experiments to be very sure of the second idea, but is it like crystal clear as it, okay, this is the right thing to do, or there is always a sense of it might not work out?
There is always a sense that it might not work out, but mentally, if you keep thinking about whether this idea could be good, whether we should have stayed in the older ship, right, you're going to lose your conviction. And losing conviction, like I have to like repeat it multiple times, if there's one thing that people get it from this, is like, don't lose conviction, right? And don't fight with your co-founders, right? If any of these two happen, your startup is screwed, like literally. So if you just keep going back and forth, it's not going to work out. There's only limited energy that you have, right? You would want to like be optimistic and try to do your best to see if the new idea even makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, that's fine. There's probably no cost to it. Go back to the drawing board, figure out something.
And do you think you always knew this, or did something happen with your old company or something that kind of explained to you very clearly that, okay, conviction is more important than everything else?
Well, actually, a YC partner like drilled that to our heads. Like literally, when we were discussing with him about like changing ideas, he was like, "I think you guys aren't convinced as much, and if you aren't convinced, then the probability of success has gone down." That's like straight to your face, right? Uh, so yeah, so that's how. But most importantly, right? Going back to your original question about like discrete points in time, whether something bad happens, right? We should always try to be like forward looking, even when the original idea like doesn't work as much as you would have wanted. You could still try to see if there is a different way to attack this. For example, maybe targeting a different set of customers, maybe targeting a different region, right? There is still some room. Maybe the idea is good, but timing is not right. Maybe some subset of a feature you could launch first that is non-core to any customer's business, and use that as a wedge to do something better, right? So in our case, we could have still built something on our older idea, but we felt that we did not have enough conviction in terms of selling this product.
And does the cost of pivot is like a factor to consider, in the sense, oh, if you pivot now, it's gonna cost 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, you know?
Yes, but it depends on how much material costs you also have, right? So, for example, if you're pivoting when you already have a team, then like actually even more than material costs, like the emotional costs of the team, like they would have worked on this for something like 3 4 months, and you're going to tell them that hey, we are moving away from this idea. That is the biggest cost. But if you don't have, let's say, a team, it's just like a bunch of 2 or 3 people, founders working together trying to figure out like what does it take. The only sunk cost is the time you spend, which I think is not a big deal, because working on a wrong idea for like 2 3 years and then figuring out like hey, this is not what we are supposed to do, that's always worse than working on a wrong idea for let's say 1 year, and then you spend the next 4 5 months figuring out what to build, and then building it, right? There are like plenty of cases of startups even about to like run out of their seed money. The last 1 or 2 months they pivoted and they made it big.
Yeah, I know a couple of them actually from Ahmedabad. Yeah, 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 yeah. There was an event management company. I forgot the name. Sorry about that. They built an event management platform for I think 4 to 5 years, to the point where Vibrant Gujarat used their platform to host the entire conference. And then they were about to run out of money. Three months in the runway, 3 4 months, and the pandemic happened.
Mhm. Wow, that's like a bad time for an event management company. Yeah.
Right. But then they were an online event management company, in the sense they so going from offline, right? They started building out features to let you host events online, and then they were able to sell it to a couple of investors. Like a lot of VCs were hosting events, and they used, I think, their product. That there is definitely more detail to the story. I'm definitely making it shorter. But then few of the investors took notice and they got funded, and in like 3 to 4 months they moved to San Francisco,
Nice.
and and the whole thing just turned around in like 4 5 months. So in March 2020 we were like reading about it. Okay, the company is not in a good shape. By September they were funded, they had a new office, and the whole thing had just turned around.
Yeah, if you just go and read the backstory, I'm pretty sure that the founders still had the conviction, and if none of the co-founders actually left the company, then they have like a great team.
Yeah, I think, and I might be slightly wrong here, but I think the team was working on half the salary to build the new features up. So yeah,
Great. That's the kind of culture that yeah, like everybody would want to create.
you mentioned 3 to 4 mental model, in the sense optionality, inversion, and Buffett's greedy versus fearful mental models. Do you think we can touch upon them from
Yeah, especially the last one would be very very interesting, right? Given the current market scenario of crypto.
greedy versus fearful?
Yes. So this is a time where we think that a lot of builders aren't going to build because the funding has dried up. This is also a time where we think that a lot of people are going to go away from crypto because of the whole like the negative PR on the crypto side, right? Which is great for us, right? Because there's less competition. There's less competition from known players. There is nobody new is going to like comment that we have to be scared of like taking away our customers, right? Which means if we could find like a real solid need even in this market, and we could sell it to customers and build a strong product, literally being greedy when others are fearful, like this is exactly the mental model that we're following, right? So that's inversion, right? So yeah, essentially how, yeah, one of the things that we it has got like two different ways of looking into it. One is Amazon's the way they look at product releases, right? Which is don't talk about features what like what is it that you like, what does it take for you to build it, right? Just talk about how the product will look like after it is shipped, right? Literally, what Amazon does is write like a 1 or 2 page memo that's almost as if like a TechCrunch article or something like that, right? That gets published. Like, use the minimal possible words, talk about the benefits for users, assume that article is going to be published, dated 1 year from now. Now work backwards and try to see like what is it that we need to do to achieve this. That's one way of looking at inversion, right? The other thing is, like, tell me where I'm going to die. I'll make sure that I'm not going to go there. I think Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, one of them, told this, right? So literally, when working on a new idea, the things that we subconsciously think about is, when this idea fails, what have we done wrong, or what could go wrong after the idea fails. Did we like lose a lot of money, burn our runway, are we mentally exhausted, is the team in disarray, and things like that. There are plenty of dimensions, like, things will inevitably go wrong, whether you like it or not. But if you could control the downside, this is now mixing inversion with, like Taleb, basically, right? You should ideally want like unlimited upside with capped downside. Given the current market scenario, we are actively looking at the negative visualizations, which is not trying to like spend too much money on marketing, like ensuring that the runway is there, like not trying to hire somebody from, let's say, California, if you can find an equally good candidate in India or Asia.
And I would say I was also very interested to discuss about engineering management, in the sense, I think you mentioned that you have worked with companies like TransferWise and PayPal, and you mentioned building systems to manage, I think, a billion queries a day,
Yeah, data points. Yeah, yeah.
data points. Yeah. So could you go deeper into the culture of engineering in these companies?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't want to like name companies, but it'll be surprising when I tell you this, right? I have never been a manager before. I have managed projects, but I have never like managed like actual people, right? So, but I was not scared, because literally in this company, one of the things that I used to tell my co-founder is, let's try to create a culture that, if some company had this culture, we would have loved to work there, right? And again, going back to inversion, the things that I really hated when working for others in all of the companies that I worked for, I tried to like remove as much as possible. I'll give you multiple examples of things that I have seen like personally went wrong. You could even edit it out, right, if you want, right? I have worked with managers who cared absolutely little about you. They only cared about their self promotion, and what is it that they would get from you, right? I have worked with managers who have literally blackmailed me. One of the managers even he asked me to do something, right? I would generally need some time to think about it and do it. But after 5 minutes, he came to my desk, saw that I was literally not doing whatever it is that he asked me to do, and he shook my desk. This is true. I'm not like exaggerating. This is true. I have worked with managers who would like sugarcoat none of the feedback sessions. They'll tell you like, "Hey, you're doing great," blah blah blah. But at the end of the year, the promotions just don't happen. But wait for another month, the manager would get promoted, right? I have worked with a manager who would literally specify the list of tasks that you do. You're literally like a robot, like a task taker. This is exactly what you need to do. This is exactly the line of code that you need to update, and things like that. You would almost feel that, okay, if you're like even more meticulous, like into even specifying that, hey, this file, yeah, why don't you just go and do it yourself, right? Like, why do you need me for, right? And thankfully, I had like a great manager before I quit working for others and started this company. This guy was actually a Russian, right? He was absolutely cool. He gave me like enough autonomy in designing systems that the way I wanted. He would literally like bat for me in all of those meetings. Even if there is a mistake that happened, he would literally come in and tell that, okay, this is a problem. he would never like point fingers at me, and it would be like, okay, let's try to fix it. And he would spend less time on meetings. He would give me like enough time to like think about problem solving it, and when I'm done for the day. I'll go back and sit with my family, right? So I'm just taking all of these experiences into creating this culture in Arda where there's less meetings every day. In fact, there is just one meeting every day, like a typical stand up. Uh, and we don't track time. We literally don't track anything. We have like a simple Google Doc where we all put in ideas together at a very high level, and let people take whatever it is that they want to take, and how much ever that control that they want in terms of designing it, they would do it. In fact, one of somebody in our team told me that, hey, this was all good, but last week you created a particular story where you actually went into the details. I felt like really demotivating. I was like, this is awesome. You're giving me a great feedback. I might have stepped over my line, right? I try to like fix it, right? So this is great. And this dude is like straight out of college, right? The thing that made me happy was that I was able to like create a culture that this person expected a sort of autonomy that is there by default. And when he stepped my line, he was there to like tell me that, hey, dude, this is not fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are some of the softer things that we are looking to build. But on the general culture piece, right? A big fan of how Netflix put together their culture. Um, there are like lots of negative things about Netflix in terms of like having just high performers and then like cutting the cream out and all that, right? But I'm not a big fan of that. But just the way they think about the culture, which is the three pillars, right? One is you hire people with highest possible skills and caliber and attitude, right? Second thing is have as little control as possible. Like, don't intervene and say this is how things should be done. This is how we expect you to do it and all that. Right? Third thing is radical candor. Like, always be sharing feedback about each other, like as soon as possible, as specific as possible. These are things that we are like still in the early phases of implementing a lot of this, but this is how I think about on the culture side.
When you are building a tech product from scratch, so you'll start writing the app, you'll start setting up the infrastructure for it. And so how does that, like, what all things need to be considered, and how do you like visualize building a project or a product right on day one, in the sense what all things need to be done?
Yeah, the most important piece of your question is day one, right? Because on day one, the kind of tools, the languages that you use is literally what you used on day 30 of a previous project. Like, don't overthink it. Don't try to see that, hey, for this particular problem statement, this programming language might be interesting, blah, blah. For some, like, extraordinary cases, obviously it makes a lot of sense. For example, if you're doing a lot of like system level code, then doing something on C++ or Rust as a random example might be a good fit. But otherwise, just try to focus on speed. Just try to focus on things that you've already done before, so you could like reuse some of the code that you already have and bootstrap your product faster. Right? All of the decisions that I would tend to make is a set of things that I am comfortable in, that I would want to use it here. Also, the things that would make me easy to hire the first 10 people with the kind of tech skills, right? Because it helps me accelerate the product shipping faster, right? This is on day one, but at some point you'll get to like day 30, where the product is out there, customers are using it, you're starting to see first signs of like scale issues and all that, right? That point, then you should like seriously think about different models. Like, do you actually want to go to a microservices architecture? Maybe take out this particular service that runs on socket.io and replace it with, let's say, Go, which has got much better performance on the sockets thingy, right? You could do like case by case basis, pull out things that you think are slowing yourself down and the team down, and then try to re-architect, right? One of the mental models here, like the most important mental models that I learned from somebody I worked with, right, is when you think about performance, most people get it wrong. They think about system performance on day one, but actually, when you think about performance, the first thing is like people performance. Like you and your engineers, are they able to like ship code faster? Are they able to debug things faster?
Hmm.
Second thing is product performance. Are you able to like ship new features?
Hmm.
Third thing is system performance. When the first two things are done, you focus on like what it is that is like slowing my system down. Where is it that I'm spending a lot more money than I should have, and try to fix it. Like just the velocity of code. If you just keep writing code, if the whole team just keeps writing code, shipping things every day, obviously in like 30 45 days you would have something ready. There's just no way that nothing would be ready, right? If nothing is ready, then yeah, somebody who's doing the high level specs and all that is doing like a really shitty job.
So in your team, for example, you do all the high level spec work, or there is someone else who do it?
Because I have an asymmetric exposure to what customers and the market needs, I tend to start off with some high level things, right? I actually wrote the API specs for the first version. I've been telling everybody that even in the future, like I would want like everybody to like contribute there, right? But I wouldn't like go into the finer details. Like if you have to do this, these are the like three or four different things that we need to do to accomplish this, and then like people take initiative in like splitting that into tasks, and like folks also like tell me that hey, you have an API spec, but this could be improved in this way. Obviously I encourage that a lot of people actually tell this, because one of the things that like we want to create is like no single person is taking control of anything, not even like decision making. Like it should be really democratized, right? And these are small things that you could do to facilitate that.
This makes sense to me. So I was actually wondering, we discussed velocity, right? And so I want to, I would say, understand how do you focus on number one, velocity, and at the same time also focus on the changing requirements and the market needs and the pivoting bit that we discussed. Like how do you, because I would say they are both running in the opposite direction a lot of times. I'm sure it's not all the time, but there might be conflicts in both these objectives. So how does that work out?
Yeah, essentially, if you define velocity as just the number of lines of code written or the number of features shipped, then these two will run in opposite directions. But if you define velocity to include a metric that says that have I shipped something that customers actually want, then it need not run in opposite directions. And velocity can also include the time spent by people thinking about how to solve these problems. Right? One of the things that we do typically in interviews is that there's like a problem statement that I share. Uh, Almost all of the problem statements have only 60-70% like need to actually write code. The rest 30% is how much you think about the problem, how deeply can you think, what are the edge cases, what problems are you trying to solve, right? The same thing applies in the real work as well, right? So people spend a lot of time thinking about it, researching is this the right way to solve a problem, uh, and if you like extrapolate it, uh, right way to solve a problem can also translate to right way to solve the right problem, right? uh, and if you have to like spend a few days thinking about hey, is this the product that the market actually needs, then so be it. I would say that the velocity is still there because people are still like spending a lot of time thinking about it.
When you are trying to build a tech product, right? What all, I would say, different kinds of technical skills are required, in the sense, when, for example, if you are still in college, then you know coding, you can develop a website, for example. That's great. But when you are trying to build a production level application, What are other things you have to learn or consider?
Yeah, one of the things that I specifically look for is how much time you spend on testing the code, right? So I've seen like people submit assessments with no test cases written. That is fine if they actually call out in the README saying that, hey, test cases are missing. This is important. That's fine. But if people don't even think about testing the code, then that is typically a bad signal, right? The other thing that you would get from exposure is how do people write high quality code, which if you have done internships, you would have seen patterns of like good coding practices that people generally like to follow. And you could emulate a lot of this, right? But most importantly, you are able to like, think deeply about the problem. Like just because the problem statement just says X, Y, Z, it doesn't stop there. There's a lot of variants and edge cases around it. If you're able to like spend time thinking about it, reading up Stack Overflow, reading the docs, you would uncover like how much of the real world, the subset that is there to cover, right? uh, and that does not need prior work experience. That just needs like street smart skills and the willingness to spend time researching and thinking about problems. Yeah, in fact, somebody, the person that I mentioned, he was straight out of college, is working with us. His name is Heath, by the way. I think he would be happy. Hi, Heath. So he, in his assessment, he thought deeply about the problem statement that we asked him to do, and after joining, he digs so much deep into a problem statement that frankly at sometimes it is stunning that when I was at his age I wouldn't have thought this much deeply about problems, right? He uncovers issues with open source code that we are trying to use. He figures out like some hidden functions that were not documented that we could use and things like that. This is like mind blowing. um, and this dude does not have a work experience. So having some experience is not a criteria for thinking deeply about problems.
I see. So this is, for example, from a perspective of a person who wants to join. How about a perspective for a builder like yourself? In a sense, what all things do you consider from a technical perspective when you are? So one thing we discussed is just start with the last tag you knew best and don't waste time. So let's talk about that stack for a minute, right? Like what all things are included in the stack?
Hmm. Yeah, it depends on the product that you're building, but most importantly, uh, if you're an API based product, so how easy it is to bootstrap APIs? Do you want to use like something like Python or use some libraries in Node.js and things like that, right? So almost all of the and even if you're building an app, you would obviously have a backend. So the tools and the technologies within the particular language that you're familiar with, go ahead and use it. And choice of testing framework is obviously much more important. A framework that especially lets you mock external requests, that self-contains all of your test cases and ensure that it works the way it's supposed to work, right? There could be use cases pending, use cases missing from the code that you have written, but whatever use cases that you have covered, I am 100% sure that is going to work, right? And other things around like logging, monitoring, observability, tracing. Yeah, try to use as much as possible the tools that you have worked with. For example, for error logging and monitoring, there's multiple options around like Datadog, Sentry, and things like that. Almost all of them should have like feature parity, so don't spend too much time, right? Or the other way could be like whichever is giving you like a cheaper starting price tag, go ahead and use it. If you get like discounts, feel free to use it, whatever it is, right? uh, so these are some of the things on the back end, at least, right? APIs and the whole testing, monitoring, and obviously similar things will apply on the front end as well. And databases, I'm a big fan of like relational databases. Uh, Again, it goes back to my thing where I have worked with relational databases in the past. And the companies that I've worked with, including big fintech companies like PayPal, TransferWise, they still run on relational database. So unless there's like a solid use case for you to use a NoSQL database like a Mongo, yeah, I would prefer using a relational database and call it a day. And cloud stack, yeah, you would use AWS. If you're like much more machine learning sort of a product, you could use GCP. Uh, yeah, not many companies that I know actually use Azure, but yeah, if that is your strong point. Uh,
Have you been thinking about, for example, how the cloud space is going right now, and does it impact you guys?
Not so much because of the infrastructure as code automation and things like Kubernetes. We are not really tied to a particular cloud provider. As long as you don't use specific things on AWS, let's just say DynamoDB, or use their machine learning tools, right? Or use something like Kinesis when you could use Kafka, right? Uh, yeah, this is one of the conscious decisions that we are making, where we automate everything using Terraform. We try to use Kubernetes. We try to use services that don't create a vendor lock-in.
So cloud agnostic.
Yeah, so as long as you have it, cloud agnostic is one, and multi-cloud is also another pattern that I'm seeing a lot of companies doing. They run all of their backend on AWS. They just run their machine learning workloads on GCP because it has TensorFlow. Right?
And most of the things are automated using Terraform.
Yeah,
The few things that we all I talked about last time was engineering performance, in the sense you keep on adding engineers, but the output does not really reflect the additions. Is it a very real thing, in the sense
it is.
are companies really struggling with it?
It is, from what I have seen in bigger companies, it is. Uh, but the way to actually solve for it is a hire like genuinely smart, hardworking, curious engineers, and give them like enough autonomy with a high level direction. The problems that like most of these big companies, the problems that exist there is they just hire people first and then try to figure out what is it that we could ask them to do, right? Versus if you have like a solid need, and you make like an informed choice that hey, there is like a genuine need and right now I don't have the bandwidth, so you hire people, and after hiring then you give them like enough autonomy. You've hired like street smart person, and you don't like tell them like this is what you do, right? So if you actually continuously try to do it, and you have like employee friendly practices around transparency of like levels, goal setting, this is how we arrived at your pay numbers, and things like that, I think yeah, most of your like performance problems should ideally go down. But if you don't even have like a product vision, and if you are as a manager hiring people just to show enough headcount so that you could get promoted, this is like a real thing in big companies, by the way. One of the criteria for you to get promoted is how many people that you have reporting to you. Uh,
Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen that happen. And if you're actually doing it, yeah, obviously you don't care much about performance, anyways, right?
So is the problem like this companies are too big to keep a check on all this, or are the incentives of design?
The biggest problem is the incentives are wrong. You're right. Incentives are wrong. And it gets even worse as like people grow up in their careers, right? There's even a saying where you get promoted to the level of your incompetency, right? At that point, the only metric that if you're a senior engineering manager, one of the metrics is how many engineering managers report to you. If you're a VP, how many directors report to you, right? That's one of the metrics. Obviously, I don't want to like bias a lot of these people. There's obviously like great people working in big companies, and there are like great sub teams where a lot of these promotions and other things depend on like actual KPIs and performance. But on the flip side, there are also big companies and teams within those companies where just the headcount is a big factor in them getting promoted.
Talking about big companies, right? They definitely have a lot of, I would say, capital to not care about these things, I would say. But for a company like yours, right? Do you guys think about profitability a lot, or
Yes,
Okay.
yes, like making revenue, making a profit is going to be one of the biggest concerns, especially given the current like funding winter that we have. Right, versus before that it was about growth, but profitability doesn't matter as much as you can like show increased revenues while you're also burning a lot more money. It's probably fine, but it's not going to be the case for the next 2 3 years at least. Right, given that we have to be conscious on the kind of people that you want to bring into the team, and while keeping one eye on the burn as well.
You guys are almost profitable, or that's not a concern right
It is not that much of a concern right now, just the profitability. But we are looking to like build a solid product and start acquiring a lot of these enterprise customers that we actually want to even get into, and work deeper and build a holistic product for them that might start with risk management. It might also get into different angles around like optimizing for different trading strategies, back testing, and building a lot of tooling around that, right? So as we start working with all of these big funds and exchanges, we would get deeper into the tech stack that can build a lot more like a depth and some sort of a moat into the product, right? So we aren't much worried about profitability because typically with enterprise customers, you start off with a basic version and you typically add more and you upsell a lot of these features. We see a lot of value and a lot of like missing gaps in this market at this point.
now? Is like onboarding enterprise customers, and is it like a very tedious process? Like, are there a lot of stakeholders you have to pitch to and explain to them as to what you're trying to do?
Yeah, it is a slow process, uh, but it is something that if you can nail it correctly, these customers are going to be sticky. So it is actually worth the effort to actually put in. It is also slow because not because there are too many stakeholders like approving something. It is because an enterprise customer has to think about like multiple different things. Like, what if like just them working with a third party vendor needs to have them sign a checklist because of the market that they're playing in, right? For example, if you're a big exchange in crypto exchange in Europe, then GDPR and other things would apply, right? You cannot just work with a random person and then like if you already have some plans on your certifications and all that, right? This will get impacted, or in the case of GDPR, your entire business will be impacted, right? So yeah, with bigger customers there's a lot of scrutiny, and it's only because of that the process is going to like take a lot more time. It is never because enterprise customers want to evaluate you against 10 other players and then they are doing like offer shopping and things like that, right? It's never the case. If they're convinced about you, if they think that you're building a strong product, the only thing that they want to check is like compliance and ensuring that all of their certification process is completely done. Due diligence, basically.
And is it something that you had to learn from ground up as to how to pitch, how to onboard them, how to educate them?
To some extent, yes, but thankfully, I have a co-founder who has a degree from a business school. He did his MBA from Columbia. He is very good in like pitching products, creating a narrative, creating like a coherent story. Uh, Thankfully, I did not like face like too much of an issue there. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about Infinite Games. Is it a book by Simon Sinek?
Yes. It is briefly borrowed on the idea of finite and infinite games. But that is like the forefather of all of these books, right? But the only reason why I did not mention that is because if you read finite and infinite games, you would literally fall asleep. Just that the last sentence is the one that will like wake you up and like you really feel that wow, this is what the author is trying to say, right? Essentially the philosophy is this: there are two kinds of games that you play. One is like finite games where the outcomes, you know what outcomes that you're playing for and you're exactly playing for those outcomes. There are infinite games where you don't play for outcomes. You're playing because you want to continue playing. And a lot of things in startup and life is just playing those infinite games. Yeah, be it relationships, working for a company, building a company, uh, like all of these.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the mental models that we have been following
Yeah,
for 6 years now.
nice. Yeah, it once you get the core of that idea, it just changes your perspective. You don't play to win. You play because you want to like uncover the truth so that you can continue playing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even like this podcast has been, I would say, such a thing for us in the sense we started the podcast when in the middle of building a product in the pandemic.
Nice.
Yeah, in the sense we are building the product. It's very excruciating, I would say. You know, so many options, so many ideas. Okay, what to do, what not to do. A lot of customers want 10 customers. Okay, they all want different things. How to prioritize? And we just kind of felt the need that maybe if we can just have like a regular session with someone who has done it, yeah, that would be like a fun side project.
Yeah, yeah. So this was great, actually. Yeah, you're actually making an impact where, like at least with me, I was able to like share my thoughts freely, right? So it was like a lot more friendly in the way that you are like pitching the whole thing. There's just no agenda. We're just like having like a hour long conversation, which is great. And we like moved back and forth across multiple things. So yeah, the general experience, if you're actually building a marketplace, then folks like me are literally the supply, and the listeners are the demand, right? The first step in building a marketplace is to bootstrap the supply and keep the supply happy. Like I've had a lot of fun doing this, so you have kept the supply happy. Yeah,
Yeah, so like I would say that is kind of the only focus right now.
nice.
And this is literally the first gig of my life. I have not done anything else in my life.
Yeah, great. I mean, yeah, even Tim Ferriss, the podcast that he became so popular, that's literally his first attempt in podcasting. But yeah, like I said, I really had a great time, man. This was like a real fun episode.
Thank you for your time, Ram.